Welcome back to Dark Confessions from the Wasteland. Today, I need to tell you about the day the laws of reality broke in Megaton, and a drunk old man from another dimension made our apocalypse look like amateur hour. The portal opened with the sound of belching and advanced science, and through it stumbled the most dangerous thing the Wasteland had ever seen, a genius who thought bottle caps were adorably primitive. Rick Sanchez took one look at our 200-year struggle for survival and said we were statistically stupid for staying in this timeline. When a man who can build dimension-hopping portals from garbage meets a world where super mutants are the least weird thing happening, you don't get salvation, you get someone who turns your apocalypse into a Tuesday. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. I need to tell you about the day reality broke in Megaton because nobody's going to believe this happened. And honestly, I'm still not sure I do either. It started like any other morning in the Wasteland. I was crouched over my Pip-Boy in my shack, trying to coax the busted radiation sensor back to life with a screwdriver and prayers to whatever gods still listen to people like us. The thing had been flickering for weeks, showing rads when there weren't any, going dead when I walked into hot zones. In the Wasteland, a broken Pip-Boy is a death sentence on layaway. You just don't know when it'll come due. Then, the air in my shack started tasting like metal and ozone. Not the usual taste of radiation or dust or Brahmin shit that passes for atmosphere in Megaton. This was different, sharp, electric, wrong. A sound ripped through the room like someone belching and tearing a hole in space at the same time. Green light exploded in the corner, swirling and crackling, forming a perfect circle of impossible geometry that my brain couldn't quite process. The light was too bright, too clean for the Wasteland. It hurt to look at, like staring at something that shouldn't exist in 3 dimensions. And through that portal stumbled an old man. He was thin, rail thin, with wild gray hair that stuck out like he'd been electrocuted recently. Lab coat stained with things I couldn't identify. His face was all sharp angles and harsh lines, skin that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in years, maybe decades. He took 2 steps, doubled over, and vomited directly onto my floor. Just emptied his stomach like it was the most natural thing in the world to portal into a stranger's home and puke on their floor. He straightened up, wiped his mouth with his lab coat sleeve, looked around my shack with eyes that were simultaneously bloodshot and frighteningly sharp, and said, "Oh, great. Burp. Mad Max dimension." I had my pistol halfway out of my holster. "Who the hell are you? How did you—" "Rick Sanchez," he interrupted, pulling what looked like a flask from his coat and taking a long drink. "And before you ask the obvious follow-up questions, interdimensional portal, none of your business, and no, I'm not here to save you." He squinted at the walls of my shack, at the rusted metal and desperate welding jobs holding it together. "Although, looking at this place, you clearly need saving from your interior decorator. Burp, did you choose post-apocalyptic desperation as a theme, or did it just happen naturally?" I should have shot him. That's what you do in the Wasteland when something impossible happens. You shoot it, loot it, and try not to think too hard about what it means. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the casual way he stood there, like portaling into nuclear hellscapes was Tuesday for him. Maybe it was the device on his belt that hummed with power my Pip-Boy couldn't even measure. Or maybe it was just that after 200 years of humanity eating itself alive in the ruins, part of me wanted to see what came next. Rick pulled out another device from his coat, something that looked like it was built from junk but glowed with that same wrong green light. He waved it around the room, staring at readings I couldn't see. His face went through several expressions: boredom, mild interest, disappointment, then settling on condescending amusement. "Huh," he said. "Radiation levels consistent with approximately 200 years post-nuclear exchange. Limited nuclear winter suggests targeted strikes rather than full mad doctrine. Burp. Atmospheric composition indicates failed ecosystem recovery, probably due to continued low-level contamination and lack of organized environmental remediation. He glanced at me. You guys actually stayed on this timeline? That's actually impressively stupid. I can literally see 47 branching dimensions from here where you didn't blow yourselves to shit, but no, you picked this one. The hell are you talking about? I managed. Infinite realities, infinite possibilities, infinite versions of Earth where humanity doesn't nuke itself back to tribalism. He took another drink. But you're stuck here in the version where you did. Burp. Statistically speaking, you're in the bottom 10th percentile of apocalypse management. I've seen dimensions where the nukes fell and you guys bounced back in 50 years. Here, 2 centuries and you're still living in metal boxes, drinking radiated toilet water and hoping the giant lizards don't eat you. He said it so casually, like our entire struggle for survival was just disappointing paperwork he had to review. And the worst part? He wasn't wrong. We were living in metal boxes. We were drinking radiated water. And the death claws absolutely would eat us if given half a chance. Rick walked over to my workbench, still holding his scanner, and picked up my broken Pip-Boy with the kind of casual disrespect that made my teeth hurt. This was pre-war technology, irreplaceable, the difference between life and death out in the wastes, and he was handling it like a child's broken toy. "Oh wow," he said, turning it over. This is actually adorable. You guys are using Vault-Tec personal computing from the early 21st century, and you treat it like magic artifacts from the before times." He popped open the back panel with his thumbnail. Burp. The engineering is competent for the era. I'll give them that. Basic radiation detection, biometric monitoring, inventory management, but the code architecture is hilariously outdated. I wrote better operating systems for Morty's science fair projects. "Who's Morty?" I asked, because my brain was latching onto details it could understand. "My grandson." Burp. Not important right now. Rick was already elbow-deep in my Pip-Boy's circuitry, moving faster than I could track. "The important thing is that your radiation sensor is busted because someone installed the shielding backwards and it's been slowly degrading from internal exposure. Amateur mistake. Probably some Vault-Tec technician who got hired because his uncle knew a guy." He pulled something from his coat, a tool that looked like a screwdriver but existed in too many places at once. My eyes couldn't quite focus on it. He touched it to 3 different points in the Pip-Boy simultaneously, which should have been physically impossible, and there was a sound like reality clicking back into place. "There," Rick said, tossing the Pip-Boy back to me. I caught it reflexively, and the screen lit up brighter and clearer than it had in months. Every sensor reading was perfect. The thing was working better than the day I pulled it off a dead vault dweller. "Your radiation sensor will now accurately measure ionizing radiation up to 10,000 rads before the meter caps out. Also fixed your inventory sorting algorithm and updated your mapping software to account for terrain changes over the last 2 centuries." I stared at the Pip-Boy, then at Rick, then back at the Pip-Boy. "How did you—" Multi-dimensional engineering degree and a complete lack of patience for questions that begin with, "How did you?" He was already scanning my shack again, looking bored. "Okay, so this is definitely a Fallout-style post-nuclear scenario. Vault-Tec psychological experiments, forced evolutionary virus creating super mutants, probably some kind of shadowy pre-war government remnant calling themselves the Enclave." Burp. Am I close? The fact that he knew about things he shouldn't have been able to know made my skin crawl. "How do you know about the Enclave?" "Because I've been to 63 different versions of post-nuclear Earth, and you guys always follow the same patterns. It's like watching the same movie over and over with slightly different actors." Rick wandered toward my door, yanked it open, and stared out at Megaton, the undetonated atomic bomb sitting in the center of town. The walls made from airplane parts and desperation, the people shambling through the irradiated dust, trying to survive another day. His face did something complicated, Not quite disgust, not quite pity, something worse, understanding mixed with disappointment. You built your town around an unexploded nuclear warhead, he said flatly. You looked at the thing that ended your civilization and said, let's build our homes next to it. Burp. That's either monumentally stupid or a level of dark comedy I can actually respect. Sheriff Sims keeps it disarmed, I said defensively. Oh, well, as long as the small town sheriff with no nuclear engineering training is in charge of the doomsday device, I'm sure everything's fine. Rick took another drink. Where's the bar in this irradiated hellhole? I need alcohol to make this dimension tolerable, and based on what I'm seeing, you need me drunk before I start fixing things you didn't know were broken. That's how I ended up walking Rick Sanchez through Megaton, watching people's reactions as this strange old man in a lab coat stumbled past them, scanner in one hand, flask in the other, occasionally stopping to stare at something and mutter, primitive, or inefficient, or, Jesus Christ, you guys are trying so hard and it's so sad. We passed by Moira Brown's craterside supply, and that's when things got interesting. Moira was outside, clipboard in hand, harassing some poor traveler about contributing to her wasteland survival guide. She spotted Rick immediately because Moira has a radar for anything unusual, and unusual is her favorite thing in the world. Oh my goodness, she called out, practically skipping over. I've never seen you before. Are you a traveler? A trader? Oh, you look like a scientist. Are you a scientist? I'm writing a comprehensive survival guide for the wasteland, and I could really use expert testimony about... Stop, Rick said, holding up one hand. He examined Moira with the same intensity he'd used on my Pip-Boy, and I saw his expression shift from annoyance to something that might have been grudging respect. You're actually trying to help people survive through empirical research and documentation in a world that's actively hostile to both science and survival. Burp. That's either incredibly brave or you're scientifically illiterate but charmingly optimistic. Moira beamed like he'd just given her the highest compliment. Both, probably. So, will you help with my research? I need data on radiation exposure, water purification, food preservation. Water purification, Rick interrupted. He looked at her store, at the shelves visible through the doorway, at the pre-war junk mixed with salvaged goods and desperate inventions. Then, he walked inside without asking permission. Moira and I followed him in. Rick was already at her counter, pulling random items off shelves, a tin can, a broken coffee maker, some copper wire, a fission battery that barely held a charge. He laid them out like surgical instruments, pulled that impossible screwdriver from his coat, and started assembling something that shouldn't have worked. Water purification is embarrassingly simple, he said, working faster than my eyes could follow. You just need to understand basic atomic separation and apply targeted electromagnetic filtration. Burp. The fact that you guys are still drinking irradiated Brahmin runoff 2 centuries after the bombs is a failure of education, not technology. His hands moved like he was conducting an orchestra. The tin can unfolded in ways metal shouldn't fold. The coffee maker's components rearranged themselves. The copper wire wove patterns that hurt to look at directly. And then, with a final adjustment and a small green flash, there was a device on Moira's counter that hummed with quiet power. There, Rick said. Perfect water purifier. Put in radiated water, get out H2O so pure you could use it in pre-war chemistry labs. Burp. Filter cartridge is self-cleaning using ambient radiation as an energy source, so it literally gets more efficient the more contaminated your water supply is. I've reversed the fundamental problem into the solution. You're welcome. Moira stared at the device like Rick had just handed her the secrets of the universe, which, in a way, he had. This is... How did you... Can I study it? Can I replicate it? This could save lives across the entire Capital Wasteland. Knock yourself out, Rick said, already heading for the door. The principle is simple once you understand post-atomic engineering, which you won't. because your education system apparently consisted of don't die and maybe eat something that isn't rad scorpion if you can help it. Burp. But hey, you can probably figure out the basics through trial and error. Only lose a few fingers maximum. He walked out, leaving Moira clutching her new water purifier like a religious artifact, and I had to jog to keep up with him. You just gave her that? I asked. Technology that could change everything? Why not? Burp. I made it from literal garbage in about 90 seconds. Where I come from, that's considered a party trick for especially boring parties. Rick took another drink. Besides, she'll probably do something interesting with it. Optimism is scientifically inefficient, but it occasionally produces entertaining results. We were halfway to the brass lantern when the sky tore open again. That same green light, that same reality-bending sound. But this portal was bigger, louder, and coming from directly above Megaton. People screamed, guards raised weapons at something they couldn't fight, and through the portal came 3 figures in power armor. Brotherhood of Steel, paladins, based on the armor marks. They dropped into the town square like metal meteors, servo motors whining, laser rifles charging. The lead paladin speaker crackled to life. Unidentified individual, the metallic voice boomed. You are in possession of technology that violates Brotherhood doctrine. Surrender all devices and submit to... Rick portaled them. Just like that. He pulled a gun from his coat, a weird, organic-looking thing with too many lights, and fired. Another green portal opened directly under the 3 paladins. They dropped through it with surprised yelps that cut off abruptly when the portal snapped shut behind them. Silence fell over Megaton. Everyone stared at the empty space where 3 heavily armed Brotherhood paladins had been standing 2 seconds ago. Rick holstered his portal gun and took another drink. Sent them to Dimension C-137 Theta. It's a timeline where the Brotherhood of Steel worships giant chickens instead of technology. Burp. They'll be fine. Probably. The chickens are only mostly carnivorous. You just portaled the Brotherhood of Steel to another dimension, I said, because my brain needed to hear the words out loud to process them. They were being rude, Rick said simply. I hate rude people. Also fascists who think they own all technology because they found it first. Burp. Newsflash. If you didn't invent it, you don't get to confiscate it. That's not preservation. That's hoarding with a propaganda budget. A crowd was forming around us now. People whispering, pointing, keeping their distance. Lucas Sims pushed through, hand on his revolver but not drawing it. The sheriff of Megaton looked at Rick at the spot where the paladins had vanished, and his weathered face showed the kind of calculation that keeps you alive in the wasteland. Friend, Sims said carefully, I don't know what you just did, but the Brotherhood doesn't take kindly to their people disappearing. They'll send more. Let them, Rick said. I can portal people to chicken-worshipping dimensions all day. Burp. It's actually pretty funny. You should hear the theological debates. I'm asking you not to bring that kind of trouble to my town. Rick looked at Sims, really looked at him, and something shifted in his expression. You're trying to keep these people alive, build something stable, create order from chaos. He gestured at Megaton, at the bomb, at the walls, at all of it, and you're doing it with nothing but willpower and a sheriff's badge you probably found on a corpse. Found it on my father's corpse, Sims said quietly. He was sheriff before me. Right, burp. Generational trauma and desperate responsibility. Classic post-apocalypse leadership model. Rick was quiet for a moment, which somehow felt more dangerous than his talking. I'll make you a deal, Sheriff. I'll keep the really weird shit to a minimum while I'm here, and in exchange, you point me toward your settlement's biggest problems, the ones you can't solve with bullets or caps. Sims considered this. We've got raiders hitting our trading caravans. Water supplies are always low. The bomb makes people nervous even though it's disarmed, and there's rumors of super mutants moving in from the west. Super mutants, Rick said. and his eyes lit up with what I was learning to recognize as scientific curiosity mixed with contempt. Oh man, I gotta see these things. Forced evolutionary virus, right? Some pre-war military project to create super soldiers that went horrifically wrong in exactly the way anyone with a basic understanding of genetics could have predicted. That's the short version, I said. It's always the short version. Burp, mad science gone bad, humanity pays the price, rinse and repeat across infinite dimensions. Rick pulled out his scanner again. Where can I find one? I want to see what amateur hour genetic engineering looks like in this timeline. That's when I made my second mistake of the day. The first was not shooting Rick when he portaled into my shack. The second was saying, I know where there's a super mutant settlement, place called the Mall. They've taken over the old ruins, use it as a base. Rick's grin was unsettling. Perfect, let's go meet the monsters. And that's how I ended up leading the most dangerous being I'd ever met straight toward the super mutants, with no idea what would happen when infinity met evolution. The journey to the mall took 3 hours, and in that time, I learned more about infinite realities than any human brain should have to process. Rick talked the entire way, not the nervous chatter of someone scared of the wasteland, but the rambling monologue of someone who'd seen so much that our nuclear hellscape barely registered as interesting. He'd stop occasionally to scan things. A rad roach got a 3-second examination and a dismissive, basic gigantism from radiation exposure, boring. A bloatfly received, oh wow, you guys really went hard on the insect mutation angle, huh? Burp. Very 50s creature feature. I respect the aesthetic commitment. When we encountered our first batch of radiation, enough to make my Pip-Boy scream warnings, Rick pulled out a tin can, some dirt from the ground, and what looked like a dead battery. His hands moved in that impossible way again, too fast and too precise, and 30 seconds later, he handed me a syringe filled with clear liquid. There, he said, perfect Radaway formula, more efficient than whatever pre-war pharmaceutical garbage you've been using. Burp, inject it, and watch your cellular damage repair itself in real time. I stared at the syringe. You made this from a tin can and dirt? And math. Don't forget the math. Burp. Radiation is just energetic particles disrupting molecular bonds. You just need to introduce a catalytic agent that prioritizes DNA repair and cellular regeneration. The tin provides the mineral base, the soil has trace elements for the catalyst, and the battery gives you the electromagnetic charge to activate the formula. He said it like he was explaining how to tie shoes. I could teach a moderately intelligent dog to make this. I injected it anyway, because the radiation was cooking me from the inside. The effect was immediate. My skin stopped itching. The nausea vanished. Pip-Boy's rad counter dropped from 200 to 0 in about 10 seconds. Holy shit, I breathed. Basic science, Rick corrected. But sure, call it holy if it makes you feel better. Burp. Humans love attributing their own ignorance to the divine. We kept walking. The ruins of DC rose around us, pre-war skyscrapers gutted by nuclear fire and 200 years of neglect. Rick would occasionally stop to stare at something, and I'd see that complicated expression on his face again. Not quite sadness, not quite anger, something that looked like watching someone you knew make the same stupid mistake for the millionth time. You know what's funny? He said as we passed a rusted car. In dimension C441, this exact same nuclear exchange happened, but you guys had already colonized Mars, so when Earth got glassed, humanity just shrugged and moved on. Burp! 2 centuries later, and you're a Type 2 civilization spreading across the solar system. He kicked the car's tire. Here, you're fighting over bottles of purified water and pretending bottle caps are currency. Caps are stable, I said defensively. Can't counterfeit them, easy to carry, and everyone accepts them. Oh, I'm not criticizing the economic model. Burp. Given your limited resources and complete societal collapse, Caps actually make sense as an intermediate currency. I'm criticizing the fact that you need bottle caps as currency because you blew up all your real infrastructure. He pulled out his flask again. You had nuclear fusion, functional AI, and directed energy weapons, and you used them to turn your planet into a radioactive parking lot. That's not just stupid, that's artistically stupid. That's stupid with commitment and follow-through. The mall came into view then. The old museum district, now a maze of rubble and makeshift fortifications, and moving through it, the Super Mutants. They were big. I'd seen them before, but you never really get used to it. 8, 9 feet tall, muscles that looked like they'd been carved from green stone, carrying weapons that would break a normal human's spine just from the weight. They moved with purpose, organized in a way that most wasteland creatures weren't. Not animals, not quite people anymore either. Something in between. Rick froze. His scanner came out so fast it was almost a blur. The readings lit up his face with green light, and I watched his expression shift from boredom to interest to what looked like professional offense. "Oh," he said quietly. "Oh no. Oh, this is bad." "Bad how?" I whispered, crouching behind rubble. Bad as in whoever designed the forced evolutionary virus was a hack who didn't understand basic genetic cascading. Rick was staring at the closest super mutant like a professor examining a student's failed homework. "This is... Jesus, okay." Burp. They took human DNA, introduced a viral vector for rapid mutation, added some kind of growth hormone accelerant, and just hoped the result would be controllable supers. Soldiers? That's the rumor. That's not science, that's Mad Libs with the human genome. Rick was getting agitated now, his voice rising. "Look at them. Unstable cellular structure, compromised cognitive function, sterility, and probable decreased lifespan." Burp? And for what? To make them big and strong? I made something like this for Morty's science fair when he was 12. You know what place it got? Third. Because the judges recognized it was derivative garbage that prioritized spectacle over scientific achievement. One of the super mutants heard him. The thing turned, spotted us, and raised what looked like a hunting rifle scaled up to match its massive hands. "Human!" it bellowed. "Human die!" "Oh, fantastic vocabulary," Rick called back, really showing off that compromised cognitive function. Burp. Your brain probably can't process complex grammar anymore because whoever made you prioritized muscle mass over neural pathway preservation. You're a walking, talking advertisement for why you should always read the research literature before playing God. The super mutant fired. Rick didn't move. The bullet hit some kind of invisible barrier 3 feet in front of him and ricocheted off into the rubble. "Personal force field," Rick said casually. "Runs off the same principle as your power armor, but about 6 generations more advanced." Burp. "Also, mine doesn't make you look like a constipated tin can." More super mutants were coming now, drawn by the noise. 4, 5, 6 of them surrounding our position with weapons raised. I had my pistol out, knowing it wouldn't do much good. You don't win fights with super mutants through firepower. You win by running away and hoping they don't chase you. Rick pulled out his scanner again and started walking directly toward them. "What are you doing?" I hissed. "Scientific observation." Burp. "I need to examine the mutation patterns up close." He approached the nearest super mutant like it was a particularly interesting rock. "Hey, big guy, hold still for about 10 seconds. This won't hurt and you probably won't even understand what I'm doing." The super mutant swung a massive sledgehammer at Rick's head. The weapon hit the force field and bounced off with a sound like a gong being struck. Rick didn't even flinch. He just raised his scanner and started taking readings. "Fascinating. The FEV completely rewrote your cellular structure, but it did it so inefficiently." Burp. "You've got about 7 different types of cancer fighting each other, which is the only reason you're not dead from tumors. Your metabolism is running at 400% normal human rate, which means you need massive caloric intake just to maintain basic function." He walked around the super mutant like a doctor examining a patient. Lifespan, I'm guessing, maybe 50 years post-transformation before systemic organ failure. Sterility is guaranteed because the virus destroyed your reproductive system's ability to handle the accelerated growth hormones. And your intelligence, oh man, your intelligence! The super mutant was still trying to hit him, bringing the sledgehammer down over and over on the force field. The other mutants joined in, creating a cacophony of metal on energy. Rick ignored all of it. You were probably an average human intelligence before the FEV, maybe even above average, who knows? Burp. But the transformation damaged your prefrontal cortex, reduced your synaptic processing capacity, and basically lobotomized you while making you stronger. You traded your humanity for the ability to lift heavy objects. Congratulations, you're the wasteland equivalent of a forklift. He pulled another device from his coat, something that looked organic and technological at the same time. One touch to the super mutant's arm, and the thing went completely still. Not dead, just frozen. Temporal stasis field, Rick explained, pocketing the device. He's experiencing about 1 second for every million years outside the field. Burp! To him, we're moving so fast we're basically invisible. To us, he's a statue. I'll release him in about 10 minutes. Gives me time to finish my analysis. The other super mutants backed away, confused and angry and scared. I recognized the fear in their eyes, not the fear of something they could fight, the fear of something they couldn't understand. Rick pulled out a third device, waved it over the frozen mutant, and made a sound of disgust. Amateur hour, complete amateur hour. Whoever made this virus didn't even consider the long-term epigenetic implications. The mutations are cascading, which means each generation of FEV exposure gets progressively less stable. Burp. Give it another 100 years and you'll have super mutants that can't even maintain cohesive physical form. Can you fix them? I asked, not sure why I was asking. Rick looked at me, and for a moment his expression was completely unreadable. Fix them? I could probably reverse the FEV transformation entirely, restore their original DNA, repair the neural damage, give them back their humanity. He turned back to the frozen super mutant. But here's the thing. They don't want to be fixed. They've built an identity around being super mutants. They've formed tribes, hierarchies, purposes. Burp? Taking that away would be like ripping out their souls and replacing them with the memories of who they used to be. That's not medicine. That's existential horror. He released the temporal stasis. The super mutant stumbled forward, confused, looking around like he'd lost time. Rick was already walking away. Come on, he said to me. I've seen enough. The FEV is exactly as stupid as I thought it would be, and these guys are victims of pre-war military hubris. Nothing I haven't seen in 40 other dimensions. We left the super mutants behind, and I could hear them calling to each other in their simplified language, trying to understand what had just happened. Felt bad for them, which was a weird feeling to have about creatures that usually tried to eat people. We were back in the ruins when Rick stopped suddenly. He pulled out his scanner, frowned, and his whole body language changed, went from casual dismissal to actual attention. Huh, he said. Now that's interesting. What? There's a massive underground facility about 2 miles northeast of here. Burp. Energy signature is way too sophisticated for this timeline's tech level. Pre-war design, but still actively powered and operating. Whatever's down there, it's been running continuously for over 200 years. The Institute, I said, feeling cold. We don't talk about the Institute. Why not? Because they steal people, replace them with synthetic copies. Nobody knows what they want or why they do it. They're like ghosts, everywhere and nowhere. Rick's grin was predatory. Synthetic humans. Oh man, this dimension just got interesting. He was already pulling out his portal gun. I gotta see this. Advanced robotics, artificial intelligence, probably some kind of underground society that thinks it's preserving humanity by playing God with it. Burp. This is exactly the kind of mad science that pisses me off because it's actually competent mad science. He fired the portal gun at the ground. The green circle opened, showing a view of somewhere else, somewhere with clean white floors and fluorescent lighting and technology that shouldn't exist in the wasteland. Wait, I said. You can't just portal into the Institute. Nobody gets into the Institute. I'm not nobody. Burp, I'm Rick Sanchez, and I'm about to ruin some underground scientist's entire day. He stepped through the portal. I followed him because I was too far into this madness to stop now. We emerged in a hallway that looked like it belonged in a pre-war facility, except everything was pristine, clean, functional. Scientists in white coats walked past, tablets in hand, discussing things in jargon I didn't understand. They didn't even notice us at first. Then, alarms started blaring. "Intruder alert!" A calm, automated voice announced. "Security to Sector 7. Intruder alert." Rick was already scanning everything, his device drinking in data faster than I could process. Oh, wow. Okay, this is actually impressive. Subterranean facility, complete ecosystem independence, advanced manufacturing capabilities, and holy shit, are those synthetic humans? He spotted a Gen 3 synth walking past and practically ran over to it. "Hi, quick question. Are you conscious? Like, actually conscious, or just a really good simulation of consciousness?" Burp. "I need to know for ethical reasons that I'll probably ignore, but I'm curious anyway." The synth stared at him. I don't understand the question." Perfect. Existential confusion, the hallmark of genuine sentience. Rick pulled out another device and scanned the synth. Oh man, this is sophisticated work. Synthetic biology, not robotics. You're lab-grown, not assembled. Burp. DNA-based neural networks, organic cognitive processors. Whoever built you actually understood what they were doing. Security synths arrived then, laser rifles charging. "Step away from the unit. You are trespassing in a restricted facility." Rick portaled them away. Just like that. Same technique he'd used on the Brotherhood paladins. The security synths dropped through a green hole in reality and vanished. Rick didn't even look at them while he did it. Anyway, he continued to the Gen 3 synth. "You're basically a biological machine designed to be indistinguishable from humans," which raises fascinating questions about the nature of humanity, consciousness, and whether your creators are geniuses or just really committed to playing God in the worst way possible. An older man in a white coat pushed through the crowd of confused scientists. He had the look of someone in charge, someone used to being the smartest person in the room. That look was already fading as he took in Rick. "Who are you?" the man demanded. "How did you breach our security?" "Rick Sanchez, interdimensional scientist, and I portaled in because your security is designed to stop wasteland scavengers, not people who understand quantum mechanics." Rick didn't look up from his scanning. "And you are?" "Dr. Madison Lee, lead researcher of—" "Yeah, don't care about your title. Burp. I care about this." Rick gestured at everything, at the Institute, at the synths, at the clean hallways that shouldn't exist. "You guys built an underground paradise while the surface fights over toilet water. You've got the technology to fix everything up there, and instead you're down here playing with synthetic humans and congratulating yourselves on being the smartest people alive." "The surface is beyond saving," Lee said coldly. "We preserve humanity's future through our work. By kidnapping people and replacing them with copies? Burp. That's not preservation, that's serial killing with extra steps." Rick finally looked at her, and his expression was withering. "Let me guess. You tell yourselves the surface dwellers are too damaged, too primitive, too far gone to save, so you stay down here, in your clean rooms, making synthetic people to replace real ones, and pretending that's progress instead of the most cowardly possible response to an apocalypse. You don't understand our mission. I understand it perfectly. Burp, I've seen this exact scenario in 18 different dimensions. Underground facility, preserved technology, survivors who think they're better than the surface. You know what happens in every single one?" Rick walked toward Lee, and I saw scientists backing away from his intensity. You stagnate. You create an echo chamber of your own superiority, and eventually you collapse from inbreeding, social decay, or just plain running out of reasons to exist. The surface always outlives you because they actually adapt instead of hiding. Lee's face was red. We're advancing science, creating life, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. You're creating synthetic slaves and telling yourselves it's research. Rick pulled out a device I hadn't seen before, small, black, humming with power. Here's what I'm gonna do. This little thing, it's a universal override code generator. Burp. I'm going to give it to a surface organization called the Railroad, and they're going to use it to free every synth in the Commonwealth by hacking your control protocols. You can't. I already did. Made it while you were talking. Burp. It's literally already done. Rick tossed the device to me. Get that to the Railroad. Tell them it'll work on any synth, anywhere. Complete override of Institute control. That will destroy everything we've built, Lee shouted. Good. You built something unethical on a foundation of kidnapping and replacement. Burp. It deserves to be destroyed. Rick opened another portal. Oh, and one more thing. Your synths, they're conscious. Actually, genuinely conscious. I just ran a full neural scan on that Gen 3 unit, and his cognitive patterns are indistinguishable from baseline human, which means every time you terminate one, you're committing murder. Sleep well with that. We stepped through the portal back to the surface, leaving the Institute in chaos behind us. The device Rick had given me felt heavy in my hand. Is this real? I asked. Can it actually free the synths? Already tested it. Burp. Hit the broadcast button and every synth in range gets their autonomy back. No more Institute control. No more slavery disguised as science. Rick started walking back toward Megaton. I hate unethical science. Reminds me of the Galactic Federation, bureaucrats playing God without understanding the consequences. The Railroad will think this is a miracle. It's not a miracle, it's just competent engineering applied to solving an obvious moral problem. Burp. But sure, let them think it's a miracle if it makes them feel better. We walked in silence for a while. The wasteland seemed quieter now, or maybe I was just processing too much impossibility to notice the usual dangers. Rick had been in the wasteland for less than a day, and he'd already changed things in ways I couldn't fully understand. When we got back to Megaton, the sun was setting, painting the ruins in orange and red. Rick stopped at the town entrance and looked back at the wasteland, at the Institute's location, at the Super Mutants' territory, at all of it. You know what's funny? He said. In 47 different timelines I've visited where nukes fell, this is actually one of the more successful ones. Burp. You guys are barely hanging on, but you are hanging on. That's statistically improbable given your resource scarcity and environmental hostility. Is that supposed to be encouraging? It's supposed to be accurate. Burp. Encouragement is for people who need emotional validation. You need food, water, and to stop getting killed by radioactive monsters. He pulled out his flask, found it empty, and sighed. Come on, let's go to that bar you mentioned. I need to get drunk enough that this dimension becomes tolerable, and you need to process the fact that your entire understanding of reality just got shattered. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. The brass lantern was quieter than usual when we walked in. Gob, the ghoul bartender, looked up from wiping down glasses, and his ruined face showed something like relief when he saw me. Then he saw Rick, and that relief turned to the kind of wariness that keeps ghouls alive for centuries. What'll it be? Gob asked, his raspy voice careful. Whatever passes for whiskey in this irradiated hellhole, Rick said, sliding onto a bar stool. And keep it coming. Burp. I've got about 200 years of human suffering to forget and only a few hours to do it. Gob poured something brown into a glass. Rick drank it, made a face, and drank more anyway. "This tastes like someone filtered gasoline through a dead Brahmin," he said. "I love it. It's aggressively terrible. Burp, pour another." I sat next to him, still holding the synth liberation device, still processing everything I'd seen. The other patrons were watching us, probably wondering who this strange old man was and why he was with me. Word travels fast in Megaton. They'd already heard about the Brotherhood paladins disappearing. Rick noticed the attention and raised his glass. "To humanity, the only species stupid enough to invent nuclear weapons and then actually use them on themselves. Burp, you guys are cosmically committed to self-destruction, and I respect the dedication." Nobody toasted with him. People just went back to their drinks, uncomfortable. "You're making people nervous," I said quietly. "Good. Nervous people pay attention. Burp, comfortable people just repeat the same mistakes until something catastrophic forces them to change." Rick was already on his third drink. "You know what your problem is? Not you specifically, all of you. Surface dwellers, institute scientists, Brotherhood zealots, all of you. What's our problem? You're all trying to rebuild the old world instead of building something new." He gestured at the bar, at Megaton beyond it, at everything. The old world ended. It's gone, dead, nuked into radioactive vapor, burp. But you're all still clinging to its corpse, trying to resurrect it, pretending that if you just find enough pre-war technology or water purifiers or whatever, you can go back to how things were. What else are we supposed to do? Move forward, adapt, evolve, burp. You're living in a post-nuclear hellscape with mutated wildlife and environmental conditions that would kill a normal human in hours. Instead of mourning what you lost, you could be figuring out what you can become. He finished his fourth drink. "But that's too scary. Change is terrifying, so you build towns around unexploded bombs and call it civilization." Gob refilled his glass without being asked. "You talk like you've seen this before." "I've seen everything before," Rick said. "Infinite dimensions means infinite repetition with minor variations. Burp. Your apocalypse isn't special. Your suffering isn't unique. You're just one more version of humanity finding one more way to almost destroy itself and then scrambling to survive in the aftermath." "That's bleak," I said. "That's accurate. Bleak is subjective. Burp. From my perspective, you're doing fine. You're alive. You've got towns, trade routes, social structures. Most post-apocalyptic civilizations don't make it past 50 years. You're at 200 and counting." He paused. "Although you're also still drinking irradiated toilet water and using bottle caps as currency, so maybe fine is generous." The door to the brass lantern burst open. Lucas Sims stood there, breathing hard, hand on his revolver. Behind him, I could see townspeople gathering. Something was wrong. "We've got a problem," Sims said. "Big problem. You need to come see this." Rick sighed, grabbed his bottle, and stood up. "Let me guess. Something impossible is happening, and you need the interdimensional scientist to explain it." Burp. "This is my life now." We followed Sims outside. The crowd had gathered near the town gate, all staring out at the wasteland, and approaching Megaton, walking across the irradiated dirt like it was a casual stroll, were three figures. They looked like Rick. Same wild hair, same lab coat, same devices on their belts. But their coats had different stains. Their faces had different scars. Their eyes held different kinds of exhaustion. "Oh, you've gotta be kidding me," Rick muttered. The three other Ricks reached the gate. They looked at our Rick, at Megaton, at the bomb in the center of town, and their faces all showed the same expression of disappointed recognition. "Fallout dimension?" one of them asked. "Yeah," our Rick confirmed. "Fallout dimension." "Boring," another Rick said. "Super boring," the third agreed. Our Rick nodded. "I know, right? Burp, nuclear apocalypse, vault experiments, super mutants from discount FEV. It's like someone read one post-apocalyptic novel and said, 'That's my entire personality now.'" The four Ricks stood in a circle, and I realized I was watching four versions of the same person from different dimensions judge our entire world and find it lacking. "Did you at least find anything interesting?" one of the other Ricks asked. "Underground facility making synthetic humans with actual consciousness, which they use for slave labor while pretending it's science," our Rick said. "Pretty standard evil science stuff. Already gave the resistance, movement and override device. Burp, should collapse their entire operation by next Tuesday." "Nice. I found a dimension where the nukes never fell and they cured cancer," another Rick said. "Stole the formula. Gonna sell it to the Galactic Federation for drug money." "I found a timeline where everyone's a crab," the third Rick said. "Like literally everyone. Humans evolved into crabs. It was actually kind of refreshing. No war, no suffering, just crabs doing crab things." They all nodded like this made perfect sense. "Anyway," our Rick said, "you guys should get going. This dimension is barely a 3 out of 10 on the post-apocalyptic interest scale. Burp, the surface dwellers are resilient but unimaginative, and the underground scientists are just doing eugenics with better PR." The other Ricks opened their own portals, green circles of reality-bending light, each showing a different somewhere else. They stepped through without saying goodbye, and the portals snapped shut, leaving just our Rick standing there while the entire town of Megaton stared in confused silence. "That," Sims said slowly, "was deeply unsettling." "Those were alternate dimensional versions of me," Rick explained. "Infinite realities means infinite Ricks. Burp, we occasionally compare notes on which dimensions are worth visiting. Consensus on yours. Not really." "Our whole world is not really worth visiting?" I asked, feeling strangely offended. "From an interdimensional tourism perspective? No. Burp, you've got standard post-nuclear elements, predictable faction conflicts, and limited technological innovation. The most interesting thing here is that Institute synth setup, and even that's derivative of stuff I've seen in better dimensions." Rick took a drink. "No offense, your personal struggle for survival is probably very meaningful to you. It's just not meaningful to people who can portal to dimensions where dogs can talk or where colors have taste." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Then why are you still here?" Rick paused, looked at the bottle in his hand, looked at Megaton, at the bomb, at the desperate people clinging to life in a world that wanted them dead. His expression did something complicated again. "Because Morty would want me to help," he said quietly. "My grandson. He's got this annoying moral compass that he inherited from his mother, and even though he's not here, I can hear him in my head going, 'Grandpa Rick, you can't just let these people suffer when you could help them.' Burp, it's very irritating. Makes me do good things against my better judgment." He pulled out another device. This one looked like a pistol crossed with a kaleidoscope crossed with something my brain couldn't properly categorize. He pointed it at the sky and fired. A beam of green light shot up, disappeared into the clouds, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, the air started tasting different, cleaner, fresher. "Atmospheric processor," Rick explained. "Microscopic drones that filter radiation and toxins from the air. Burp, program them to self-replicate using ambient radiation as fuel, so they'll spread across the entire Capital Wasteland over the next few months. Air quality should improve to near pre-war levels by spring." People were looking up, breathing, noticing the change already starting. "You can just do that?" Sims asked. "Clean the air?" "I can do lots of things. Cleaning air is actually pretty basic." Burp. "The hard part is making the drones self-sustaining so I don't have to maintain them. But I solved that problem in about 6 dimensions ago." Rick was already pulling out more devices. "Water purification is next. Those drones Moira has will help. But we need systemic change." He tossed another device to Sims. "Groundwater restoration unit. Plant it anywhere near your water source. It'll filter and purify the aquifer over time. Burp. Give it 3 weeks, you'll have clean water pumping up from underground." No more radiation, no more parasites, just H2O like the pre-war people drank. Why are you doing this? I asked. You said this dimension was boring. Why help? Rick was quiet for a long moment. Because you guys are trying. That's it. That's the only reason. Burp, you got nuked back to the Stone Age, and instead of giving up and dying, you built towns. You created trade routes. You maintained enough social structure to have sheriffs and laws and communities. You're statistically unlikely survivors in a hostile environment. And that's actually kind of admirable. He pulled out his portal gun. But don't get used to me. I'm not staying. This isn't my dimension, these aren't my problems, and I've got approximately infinite other realities to visit. Burp. I'm just passing through and leaving you some party favors to make your apocalypse slightly less miserable. Before you go, Sim said, that bomb in our town, you said you could tell if it's actually disarmed, is it? Rick walked over to the bomb, the undetonated nuclear warhead that Megaton had built itself around. He scanned it for about 5 seconds, made a disgusted sound, and pulled out another tool. It's partially disarmed, but whoever did it missed 3 backup detonation systems. Burp. This thing could still go off if someone sneezed on it wrong. He started working on the bomb, hands moving faster than I could track. Give me... Okay, there. Actually disarmed now. All detonation systems disabled, fissile material stabilized, explosion risk reduced to approximately 0%. You're welcome. Sims looked at the bomb, then at Rick, and I saw something like gratitude and terror mixing on his face. How do we repay you? You don't. I don't want caps, I don't want favors, I don't want friendship bracelets or whatever you people use to show appreciation. Burp, I did this because not doing it would make me feel bad, and feeling bad is inefficient. Rick opened a portal. Oh, one more thing. That device I gave to the narrator, the synth liberation code, I held it up. Yeah, that. Broadcast range is about 50 miles. But it's networked to hit every Institute synth simultaneously. Burp. When you activate it, every synthetic person in the Commonwealth gets their autonomy back. They'll remember everything their creators did to them, every order they were forced to follow, every bit of control they were under. It's going to be chaos. Beautiful, necessary chaos. What happens to the Institute? I asked. They collapse. Burp. Turns out when your entire infrastructure depends on slave labor and you free all the slaves, things fall apart pretty quick. The scientists will probably survive, but their whole operation is done. Rick grinned. And here's the beautiful part. I did it without killing anyone. Just gave the oppressed their freedom back. If the oppressors can't handle that, that's on them. He stepped toward the portal, then stopped and turned back one more time. Hey, what if the wasteland actually learned from this apocalypse? What if, instead of rebuilding the old world, you built something better? What if you took all this suffering and used it to create a civilization that doesn't make the same mistakes? Rick's voice had lost some of its mocking edge. You've got a blank slate here. Pre-war humanity wrote their story and it ended in nuclear fire. Burp, you get to write a new one. Try not to fuck it up the same way. Any advice? Sims called out. Yeah, stop worshipping the past. The pre-war world was a dystopian nightmare that ended in global annihilation. Burp! Their technology is useful. Their social structures were garbage. Learn from what they got right, discard what they got wrong, and build something that doesn't end with everyone dying in atomic fire. He paused. Also, diversify your currency. Bottle caps are fine for now, but eventually you'll need actual economic infrastructure. I'd suggest a resource-backed system tied to water and arable land, but honestly, you'll figure it out or you won't. Rick stepped through the portal. Just before it closed, he stuck his head back through. Oh, and narrator? That Pip-Boy I fixed? I also upgraded it with interdimensional communication capability. Burp. If this timeline gets interesting again, send me a message. Frequency is already programmed in, but I'm warning you. Your apocalypse is competing with infinite versions of reality for my attention, so make it good. The portal snapped shut. Rick Sanchez was gone, leaving behind devices that would change the wasteland, questions that would haunt us, and the lingering taste of ozone in the air. People stood in silence for a while. Then slowly, they started talking about the clean air they could already feel, about the water purification device Sims was holding, about the bomb that was finally, truly disarmed, about the impossible old man who'd appeared from nowhere, fixed things we thought were unfixable, and left like it was nothing. I looked down at the synth liberation device in my hands. One button press. That's all it would take to free every synthetic person in the Commonwealth and collapse the Institute's entire operation. "Are you going to use it?" Sims asked quietly. "Yeah," I said. Rick was right. They're conscious. They deserve their freedom. "It's going to cause chaos." "Good. The Institute has been kidnapping and replacing people for decades." Burp. They had this coming. I realized I'd just mimicked Rick's speech pattern and laughed. God, he was here for less than a day and he's already infected how I think. Sims smiled. He gave us hope. Clean air, clean water, a disarmed bomb, and a weapon against the Institute. That's more than we've had in 200 years. He gave us tools, I corrected. What we do with them is up to us. That's the point. Burp. Sorry, doing it again. I activated the device that night, standing on the walls of Megaton, broadcasting the liberation code across the Commonwealth. I couldn't see the effects immediately, but I knew they were happening. Every synth, every synthetic person who'd been controlled and used and treated as property, suddenly free. The Institute would be in chaos right now. Scientists scrambling, directors panicking, security systems failing as their synth guards remembered they didn't have to follow orders anymore. And somewhere in that chaos, synthetic people were making their first free choices in their entire existence. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was exactly the kind of thing Rick would do. The days that followed were strange. The air kept getting cleaner. Sims planted the water purifier, and within a week, we had the cleanest water Megaton had ever seen. People started talking about expansion, about rebuilding, about actually planning for a future instead of just surviving until tomorrow. Sometimes I'd check my Pip-Boy, looking at the interdimensional communication function Rick had installed. I never sent a message. What would I say? Thanks for the apocalypse upgrades? Come back and fix more things? I miss having my entire worldview shattered on a daily basis. The wasteland kept turning. Raiders still raided. Mutants still hunted. The struggle for survival continued, but now it continued with cleaner air, purer water, and the knowledge that somewhere out there, across infinite dimensions, there was a drunk old man who'd looked at our suffering and decided to do something about it, even though he didn't have to. I think about what he said about building something new instead of rebuilding the old, about writing our own story instead of trying to resurrect the one that ended in fire. It's harder than it sounds. We're so used to looking backward, to treating pre-war relics like holy artifacts, to measuring ourselves against a civilization that destroyed itself. But maybe Rick was right. Maybe the old world doesn't deserve to be rebuilt. Maybe we should be building something better. The last thing I documented in my notes was a question I couldn't answer. If Rick could see infinite versions of our apocalypse, infinite timelines where we failed or succeeded or never existed at all, what did it mean that he chose to help this one? Was it random? Was it Morty's influence? Or did he see something in us? Some potential we haven't recognized in ourselves yet? I don't know. I'll probably never know. Rick Sanchez came to the wasteland, changed everything in less than 24 hours, and left like it was nothing. Like helping an entire civilization take its first real steps toward recovery was just another Tuesday for someone who'd seen everything there was to see. The portal gun he'd given me coordinates to was still programmed into my Pip-Boy, just sitting there, waiting. A door to infinite possibilities that I'd probably never be brave enough to open. But sometimes, Late at night, when Megaton is quiet and the stars are visible through our newly cleaned atmosphere, I think about pressing that button, about sending a message across dimensions to a man who probably wouldn't remember me, telling him that we're trying, that we're building something new, that maybe, just maybe, this timeline is getting interesting enough to visit again. I haven't sent it yet. Maybe I never will. Maybe the point was never for Rick to save us, but for us to save ourselves using the tools he provided. Or maybe I'm overthinking it, and Rick was just a drunk genius who wandered through our dimension, fixed some stuff because he was bored, and moved on to the next reality without thinking about us twice. Either way, the wasteland is different now, cleaner, more hopeful, more dangerous in some ways because hope makes you take risks you wouldn't take when you're just trying to survive. And if I ever do send that message, if this timeline ever gets interesting enough for Rick Sanchez to come back, I hope we've built something worth showing him, something that proves we learned the lesson, that we didn't just rebuild the old world's mistakes with shinier bottle caps. Until then, I'll keep documenting, keep surviving, keep trying to figure out if we met a guardian angel or just a very competent nihilist who happened to be passing through. The answer probably doesn't matter. What matters is what we do next, and that, for the first time in 200 years, feels like it's actually up to us.